Welcome everyone that's come on. For anyone watching this back that was supposed to be on here, or anyone that didn't have time to jump on, welcome to you as well. Massive thanks to Carlos for your kind of support of the group. And if anyone's watching this back and has any questions, then feel free to get in touch with us or Carlos directly. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer anything. If you're not watching this live. Welcome to anyone that I recognize a couple of new names. So welcome to anyone that's found the group for the first time. Usually Jeff will be on this. He runs the AWS Tampa Bay group and the Azure group. It's been a bit of a growth journey of his for the past couple of years, and we've come on board in the last year or so as partners to kind of help him grow this and kind of continue to promote technology across Tampa and Orlando areas. Just a quick one, if anyone's in the AWS space and is considering new roles, we've got a couple of opportunities in the infrastructure, cloud and development space across a variety of technologies and languages, but all kind of predominantly AWS based. So do reach out to myself or Matthew if you're looking for anything at all that's quite cloud heavy. Without further ado, I'll pass you over to Carlos. And yeah, any questions, Carlos, would you like them throughout or at the end at all?
It can be throughout. They can post in chat, and then perhaps you guys can field those questions and then interrupt me, and we can make this interactive, make this fun.
Perfect.
Yeah, I've got a little, I've got a set of slides, and then I have a demo that I recorded because I didn't want to leave it up to the live demo gods today. So just to be sure, I have 3 quick videos showing some of the features that I wanted to highlight today.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen now. I've made you co-host. So
cool. So is my audio level okay?
Yeah, sounds good for me. If anyone has any issues, then speak now.
All right, let me click some buttons here. Make sure I got this going. All right, let me just do this real quick.
So we've got a couple of latecomers. Perfect. Welcome, Smathy.
Cool. All right, let me organize my windows. And all right, let me share my screen. All right, can you all see it?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool, awesome. So thanks again, guys, for the opportunity to speak here today. And so thanks everybody who joined to spend some of your lunchtime with us, talking and learning, hopefully sharing a little bit of your experiences too. Open to feedback. Like Elliot said, if you all have any questions or comments, feel free to post in the chat throughout the presentation, and we can bring them in and talk about it. So today I'm going to be talking about building cloud native mobile applications. And for the cloud native portion, I'm going to be focusing on the AWS Amplify service, which is a service that we at Idopter Labs, the company that I work for, we started using it recently, and we actually gave it a try again. We've known about the service. I've personally tried it out a couple times, and it wasn't until recently that I thought it was a good time to adopt it. And we're going to talk about the reasons in a little bit, but this is what we're going to be focusing today. Pretty much Amplify, how to get started with Amplify in combination with React Native, which is another technology that we use extensively at Idopter Labs, and hopefully we can share some of the benefits that we found in this combo. Again, my name is Carlos Souza. I'm on Twitter, on GitHub at Kaique. If you want to follow, if you have any questions after this meetup, if you want to reach out, feel free to reach out, and also my email. So yeah, a little bit about me. I'm a consultant. The technology that I focus mostly is Elixir on the back end. And then if it's not web applications, if clients want mobile applications, then React Native is our technology of choice. I'm not going to focus too much on React Native in this application, but if anybody has any questions, post in the chat or reach out to me, and I'll be happy to talk about some of the reasons why we chose React Native. And why am I talking about Amplify when I've just said that we use Elixir in the back end, right? Again, Elixir, neither one is an absolute best choice, right? So if you've been in the technology industry for a little bit of time, you've probably heard there's no silver bullet. There's no one solution that works for every single project. And Amplify is one of them. It's not for every project, but we do believe that for the projects that could benefit from Amplify, they will have a huge competitive advantage going into market, right? And we're going to talk about the reasons in a little bit. I'm also a Pluralsight author. I have, produced content for them for the past 6 years in the AWS realm, but also in Elixir and JavaScript. And I live in Orlando, and here I help organize the Orlando JavaScript user group. So yeah, enough about me. So the motivation for this talk, right? Like I said, Amplify is not for every project. Now, which projects could benefit from Amplify, right? First of all, front-end focused projects. So these are projects that need to iterate fast on the front end rather than on the back end. And these are projects that perhaps need to experiment with different types of user experience, with different types of design, or even going between perhaps a mobile front-end client to a web front-end client. And these are projects that don't require necessarily complex operations in the back end, and they're mostly CRUD operations. And CRUD stands for create, retrieve, update, delete. And this is essentially the operations that we need to persist data and then read data, right? These types of projects that I'm talking about that are a really good fit for Amplify, projects that don't necessarily require a lot of business logic in the back end, at least not in the initial phase of the project. And these are also projects that require some sort of content management once they are deployed to production. And content management from a person or a group of people that might not be technical. So these are the people that don't know how to run SQL insert commands, or perhaps don't even know what AWS is. So they're not familiar with the AWS console. They're not comfortable navigating the console and going into the specific data stores, be it DynamoDB or some RDS database. Like, these are people that they are part of the business, but they're not technical. And these people need to update the content of your project. But like I said, they're not familiar with the lower level technologies that are used. So these three motives are what drove us to look into Amplify again and adopt it as one of the technologies that we use for these kinds of projects. And so far, we've used them with much success, and clients have been happy. The development team has been happy, and we've been able to deliver value as fast as we possibly could. Now, it's not to say that there aren't tools out there that are lower level, so to speak, that could offer these kinds of benefits. So if you, some of you might have heard, there's a web framework for Python called Django, and Django is known for having a really solid Django admin feature that could, with not a whole lot of effort, set up a content management interface. And the same thing for Ruby on Rails. There's Rails admin, but still these tools require you to do some coding. And Amplify, as we're going to see in a little bit, doesn't require any coding upfront at all. So it's easy on the developer, easy on the client, easy on the front end developer, as we'll see. Now, when we talk about cloud native applications in the context of serving a mobile client or a thin web client, the first thing that comes to mind is the combination of Lambda, AWS Lambda, and API Gateway. So Lambda to run the actual business logic, and then API Gateway to expose those functions as an HTTP API. And this combination works really well. I actually still have apps published to the store that use this with a whole lot of success, and they're working perfectly. They don't need to be changed, right? However, one problem with this is that, albeit being simple, fast, and scalable, is still require a little bit of manual work if you want to extend this functionality to a couple of things I mentioned, more specifically content management, right? So if we, for example, set up an API that returns data, the only way to create some sort of content management to manage the data returned by this API is to do more manual work. Now, we could resort to something like the serverless framework that could make things faster, but still you are building that content management side yourself as a developer. There is work involved into doing that. Now, with Amplify, you don't have to worry about the underlying services, and you don't have to worry about that content management. So what is Amplify? Amplify is a service that is a combination of a few underlying AWS services, and it exposes those services in a user-friendly way and adds some capabilities on top of those services. So a few of the services that Amplify groups together is AppSync, which is a GraphQL service endpoint. DynamoDB, which is the NoSQL data store, authentication using Amazon Cognito user pools, functions, Lambda functions, and storage with S3, and artificial intelligence and machine learning through Amazon Translate, Poly Recognition, Transcribe, Textstrat, and Comprehend. So all of these services are grouped together in Amplify in a way that's easier to use than if you would work directly with each individual one of those. Now, what's in it for you? What's in it for your team, right? So let's break it down into a few common roles that we find in software development projects. So we have the front end engineer, back end engineer, and we have a client, right? So just a simple way to put it. And these don't have to necessarily be different people. It could be one person with the same roles, but just to make it simple, what's the benefit for each one of those roles, right? So the front end engineer might find benefit in Amplify because of GraphQL and the data store abstraction that Amplify offers. Now, GraphQL, for those that are not familiar, is a service that exposes a query language that facilitates determining exactly what kind of data you want to fetch from your backend, right? Now, this might seem like we already have this in, say, like a REST API or writing SQL, but GraphQL allows the separation of the query language of who writes the query from who executes the query. So think of it, if you're writing a SQL statement, the SQL statement lives in the server, right? And then you have to, say, expose that SQL statement through a single API that then the front end can consume, right? What GraphQL does, to simplify it, it actually moves the responsibility of writing the query to the client and exposes a single endpoint that consumes the query and then runs the query and then returns the query, right? That's one of the benefits. It does a bit more than that, as we'll see. It has real-time capabilities through GraphQL subscriptions and also a powerful caching mechanism. But essentially, GraphQL allows the front-end team to move independently from the back-end team. And that is a huge benefit that you can get when you're moving fast in the initial stages of a project. Now, the back-end engineer or the back-end engineer role might find great benefit in Amplify because it makes things simple and easy. So all those services that we listed, like provisioning those services can be quite challenging individually. But Amplify makes it easy, makes it just a few clicks away. It provisions all those services using cloud formation templates in the back end. And you don't have to worry about provisioning any of those things. And then lastly, the client, it's a faster time to market. And when you're talking about certain types of projects, startup projects more specifically, timing is everything. So the faster you can get to the market with your product, the better competitive advantage you will have versus your competitors. So, time to market and in AWS. So clients know AWS. The AWS has a name, has recognition, and knowing that your service is running on AWS is a guarantee to the client. A little bit of a hiccup here. All right, so let's see how the bare bones, the underlying services from AWS map to Amplify services. So here on the left, we have the services, AWS services. So the ones that I already mentioned: AppSync, DynamoDB, Amazon Cognito, S3, and the benefit of elasticity that AWS offers. So instead of working with these services on the left, when we're working with Amplify, all we have to worry about is much simpler abstractions. So we can work with an abstraction called a data store, which we'll see in a minute, for querying data from and to DynamoDB through AppSync. We work with an auth abstraction to work with authentication and authorization. We work with storage for S3. And lastly, the one thing that changed my opinion towards Amplify is the new addition of the admin UI. Now, this was added back in December of last year, and personally, it was a game changer. And we're going to look at it in a minute too. So all these services on the right are essentially what Amplify is. Abstractions on top of underlying services on the left that if we were to work with them individually, they would be much more complicated. So essentially is 100% of the work with 20% the effort by using Amplify. Let me see if I can fix my camera real quick. It tends to die every now and then. See if I can come back. Still dead. I'll use another camera for now. All right, let's keep going. So yeah, I'm not going to focus too much on React Native, like I said, but if you're watching this later or if you're looking through the slides, this is essentially how the dependencies that we need to use in order to run the demo application. Now, let me move over to a couple videos that I recorded. Let me stop sharing my screen real quick. All right, this is my video now. We're back. And let me share my screen again. And all right, so I'm gonna pull up a couple videos I recorded going through the process of adding Amplify to an existing React Native application. Pull up the first video. All right, can you all see the video? Just a thumbs up. Yeah, cool. All right, cool. So in this first video, we can see here on the right, that's the example application that we have. It's a simple flat list. It's a simple list of recipes, and each one has comments. We can click on the comments, we can look at the comments, and then we can see here on the left, for now, these are hard-coded values, and that's how I personally start every front-end heavy project, is with hard-coded data. I don't want to worry about, at least at this point, an API yet. So at this point, what we want to focus as a team, as a development team, is figuring out what the user experience and what the UI is, right? And then as you can see, we're using hard-coded values. It's just a JSON object for each recipe entry. And then we have a title, we have a body, and then we have comments left for each one of those. Now let's start connecting Amplify with it. So going to the landing page, we have two options to get started. We can choose the one on the right, and this is mostly for web applications that use Amplify. And Amplify takes care of producing the artifact, storing on S3, and doing all the CloudFront optimizations. This is not our example today. Since we're using a React Native project, we're going to focus just on the back end. We're going to give this Amplify application a name, Recipes Meetup, and now Amplify is going to take care of provisioning the entire backend for us using those services that we've mentioned, AppSync, DynamoDB, and all that stuff. And it takes a little while to set up. There's a lot of work going on. And once it's done, this is the page that we see. Now, I want to mention, I've mentioned this at the beginning, but I want to emphasize this. Now, Amplify is, I find it absolutely amazing for projects like this that iterate fast in the front end, right? So if you want to iterate, if you have a lot of iteration on the back end, so if you're making a lot of modifications to the back end, if you're making a lot of modifications to your table or to your API, then it might not be the best fit, because each deployment takes a while. It takes a couple of minutes, it takes 3 to 5 minutes. So this is one of the things that you want to kind of deploy and let it run, and then go back to your front end and then iterate your front end. And one of the reasons why you are allowed to do that is GraphQL, because exposing a GraphQL API, then you don't need to make modifications to add new queries, right? Again, like this, the query, the responsibility of writing the query is shifted, and now it's part of the front end development team. So you actually don't need to change the back end a whole lot. All right, so this is the landing page of our Amplify project, and we're going to open the admin UI. And this is the new feature that was added end of last year. And it makes so much easier to manage and to make changes to your Amplify project. Now, here we can do a couple of different things. And for now, I'm just going to focus on creating a data model. And this is going to create our DynamoDB table and GraphQL schemas, and then expose those through the AppSync API. And you can see here we have a visual tool to add tables. We're going to create the first table. We're going to call it recipe, and leave the ID field, and then create a field name title. And here on the right, there's a drop down, and we can choose between the primitive data types, or use some of AWS's custom data types that do formatting and validation for us. We're just going to stick with the string for now. And then we're going to add a new field of body, and another one named comments. So for this specific field, we are going to create a custom type. We're going to call this type a comment, and then give it a body. And then make sure that this is required. And then down at the bottom, we're going to say that this comments is actually on an array of the comment type. So as you can see, so far, everything has been visual. We haven't had to do any code. And we're going to add this special field called created at. And we give it the type AWS datetime. And what this does is that every time that a new entry is added to the data store, the AWS automatically populates this field, so we know when a record was created. And this is going to help us with sorting. So once, if we need to sort the ascending or descending, if we need some custom type of sorting, having a field like that is very helpful. So we added that. And then we can click save and deploy. So far, no change has actually been made to the backend. Everything has been is kind of waiting around until we click save and deploy. Once we click save and deploy, that's when Amplify triggers a change in the backend through CloudFormation templates. Now that's all saved, we can go to this content portion and we can have a manual editing of our content. So we can add a new entry, create recipe, and you see we have all the interface ready for us. We didn't have to do anything. We can add it in Markdown if we want to. It's going to keep it text for now, and it automatically added a new comment for us there. It's blank though. So notice we saved a recipe and it automatically populated the created at for us. So super helpful. We can also auto-generate data if you want some dummy data. So just add some 3 rows, added some lorem ipsum for us. Very useful for prototyping. Let's just delete that. And then what I want to show you in this video is how to add how to invite a person to join this Amplify project so they can manage the content. So let's say, going back to our example, we have a person on the team or on the client's side that is not technical at all. They've never heard of AWS. They could, you know, they don't know how to operate the AWS console. They know nothing about the underlying services. All they have to do is add data to the system, delete some data to the system. This is how we can add them. We go to this link, give team members access to the admin UI, and then we click on invite users, and we can invite them to either have full access, and that would allow them to do the data modeling that we've just done if they're a little bit technical. But if they're not technical at all, if all they have to do is manage data, then we select manage only. It's already selected. We click send invite, and that's going to send them an email that's going to look like this. So they have the URL that they visit to log in, and then they have the username and the password. I'm going to use that password to log in, and AWS is going to force us to define a new password, and we're logged in. Now notice the interface is much simpler than the one before. Again, this user doesn't have access to data modeling or any of the other functions. All they have access to is managing the content and perhaps editing their own profile. Now let's go ahead and just make sure that we can still add stuff as a content manager. Yep, we're able to add, and let's go ahead and just delete this one because it's blank. Cool. So yeah, so the first part of this demo is just setting up an Amplify project. Again, no code, and inviting an external user, perhaps on the side of the client, to join this project so they can add the data. Now, let me show you all. Are you seeing the admin UI page right now? Yeah, all right, cool. So what I wanted to show you in this page real quick is some more advanced features of the modeling portion. So here we used a custom data type. So for those that have worked with other NoSQL database like MongoDB, this is kind of like an embedded object. But Amplify also has pretty good visual support for relationships between tables. So let's say that we wanted to add a new table for chefs, right? We could click here, add model. And let's say this model would be a chef. This chef could have, let's say, just a name, right? And let's make this name required. If we wanted to create a relationship between a recipe and chef, we could click this button down here at the bottom, add relationship. And then select related model, we'll say chef. And then we have the option of creating one of these 3 relationships, a one-to-one relationship, or a one recipe belongs to many chefs, or the more complicated relationship, many to many. Many recipes belong to many chefs, right? Suppose we chose this one, and relationship name, let's just make this lowercase, chefs, and then we save. Notice that we would have automatically added for us a foreign key attribute to the chef table, and then a relationship name defined in the recipe table. So just an example, super easy, no code. And I'm going to roll this back because I don't want to do this right now. All right, let's go ahead to the second portion of the video where we're actually going to start integrating our React Native application to Amplify. There it is. All right, so this is where we left off. So another cool thing about the admin UI, there's this button down at the top called local setup instructions that has snippets of code that that we need to use in order to either sync the Amplify environment with our local environment, or as we'll see in a couple of minutes, gives us a couple of snippets to learn how to use some of the abstractions that it offers. Now, in order to sync the environment with our local application, we run this amplify pull command, giving the application ID and the environment name. So once this project gets going further down the line, we might want to have another environment for production, so we can test things in staging and then promote those changes to production. For now, all we have is staging, and that's what we're going to use. So we have the command, we can click on it, we can copy that command, move over to the terminal, run that command, and then pull all those changes. It's going to ask us to quickly authenticate on the admin UI. And then it takes us through a couple of prompts in order to determine how to better create the local files, right? So in this case, I'm using Visual Studio Code. This is a JavaScript project using React Native, and I'm just going to use the default values for the rest. And this is interesting. So it's asking, do you plan on modifying this backend? And we said yes. And what this does is it pulls all the GraphQL definitions for the mutations and the queries and the resolvers, so that if we want to make changes on which queries we want to run, or if you want to add new queries, we can do this locally and not have to go through the deployment process. Now the pull is done, and these are the two folders that the Amplify pull command changed. So we first created the Amplify folder here at the top, and then next you added a couple files to the source folder. And just to give you an example of the types of files that it created, so you can see a bunch of GraphQL templates that we actually don't have to worry about them unless we want to make changes. For this example, we're not going to touch these files at all. Now let's go back and change how we are populating the data in the app. So as you can see, we're still using the hard-coded JSON, and I've grouped all the Amplify code in this API.js file. So let's take a look at this file. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into what it's doing, but I just want to point out those abstractions that we talked about. Here we have data store, and this is essentially the abstractions that we're using to query for all the data in our table. And then in the function below, we're going to use this for real-time capabilities. So all we're using is the data store. We're not using at this point anything GraphQL. So as far as the front end is concerned, there's like no GraphQL. All they have to worry about is data store, and no interaction directly with AppSync or with DynamoDB. Again, all we're using at this point is data store. Super simple. And now going back to our component that's actually rendering the data, we're going to replace that JSON with a load recipes JavaScript call. And this is some React specific code here. If you're not familiar with React, don't worry. We can, ask me a question, or we can talk about this later. I just want to show how very little JavaScript we have to write in order to connect our React Native application with Amplify. So yeah, that's it. So that's all the JavaScript code that we needed to connect our React Native application to our Amplify backend in order to query data, right? We're just querying data, but this is all we had to do. And you can see this is the data that we have stored in Amplify. Let's just go ahead real quick and change some of this data. Let's delete one of the entries. And then if we refresh our app, we can see it's not there yet. Cool. Now, obviously we had to refresh the app in order to see the changes that were made to the backend. Now, I want to show you how to add real-time capabilities. So the app is automatically refreshed once we change the backend. So this is the third and last video. And what we want to do here is we want to make sure that when we change comments in Amplify, those comments are automatically updated in the React Native application. So here we can see we added 2 comments, but it's still static. We still have to go back and refresh the app, right? Let's see how we can add the real-time capabilities powered by GraphQL, but again, we're not going to have to work with GraphQL directly. All we have to work with is that data store abstraction. Let's go ahead back to the code, and then we're going to use that second function called observe recipes. I'm sorry. I'm going to give it a callback saying every time a recipe changes, load them again. Cool. Single line of code. Now we go back to Amplify, and notice I'm going to delete that. Notice on the right here, as soon as I click save, the comments are automatically updated. So do this again. Let's add a new comment. As soon as we click save, screen on the right is updated in real time. No refresh needed, and the comments are there. So that is it for the demos. And one last thing that I want to show in this presentation. Let me all right, pull this up, right? Cool. So real quick, I want to talk about the pricing. All right, so the pricing that's on the page, it includes the build and deploy times. They charge for that, and also for hosting your application, right? But in this case, if you're talking about a React Native application, we're not necessarily hosting anything other than the services. So what we need to pay attention to is the build time. If you're using the free tier, you have 12 months of to use. I think it's like 1,000 or 10,000 hours of build time. But if you're past that free tier, you're paying 1 cent per minute per build time. As I've mentioned, the build times tend to take a considerable amount of time. A couple minutes. I think 3 to 5 minutes is usually what it takes. So that's where most of your spendings in Amplify is going to come from. So kind of an average, if you're doing 2 deploys a day for an application like this, you're going to pay around $6 a month, which is not a whole lot. Now, last but not least, I just want to mention where can you learn more about this. And apparently my slides are not loading like that, but anyway, I highly recommend Ali Spittel course on egghead.io. She did a really good job showing how to use Amplify through the Amplify UI, and that's sort of what got my attention back to Amplify, because I tried using Amplify a couple times in the past, but the 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 command line workflow of making changes locally and then using the command line to push those changes, I wasn't really a fan of. But with the addition of the UI, that made me reconsider, and now I think we're in a much better place to use Amplify with the admin UI. And Ali is also a AWS developer advocate for Amplify. So if you want to stay on top of the news in Amplify, definitely give her a follow on Twitter. And Amplify, a service, has pretty good documentation. It's not super extensive, but it's definitely a good place to go if you want to get started. Everything I've covered here today can be found in the documentation, and also I'll be posting the link to the source code if you wanna take a look at the React Native source code that I use for this example app. And that's all I had for today. I don't know if we have any questions, any suggestions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Carlos. Really great. We do have a question in the chat. Before I read that out, and a couple that I've got, has anyone got a question they wanted to ask? Don't be shy. If you do, just unmute yourself. If not, we'll ask the teacher's question, and then a couple that I've got. Okay, so Satish has put in the chat. So he's more into the Angular side of things on the UI. He's just wondering what his options might be when connecting with Amplify on that side of things.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's see here if I can share this, because I do believe they offer. Yes, they do. Let me pull up here.
And is that the same for something like Vue as well, or any of the other languages?
Yeah, it is the same thing. Once we create, let me see if I could create a new app. Yeah, so they offer all right, let me get out of Sandbox, Amplify, pulling it up because I want to show you. Well, yeah. So the one thing about Amplify is that because like the admin UI, because it's such a new feature, they're constantly iterating over it. So the interface is constantly changing. I was trying to pull up here the page where it gives you like a drop down to choose your framework of choice, but it's not there anymore. But the short answer is yes. It has support for Angular, it has support for Vue, and it has support for native platforms such as iOS. It has support for Flutter if you're more into Flutter than React Native. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Anyone else thought of anything? If not, I've got a couple to ask. Just kind of more about the mobile side of things. You mentioned that you were using Elixir. What are the kind of benefits of using something like that over Node or something more traditional that maybe people have done with that Node back to server side and React Native on the front end? They're kind of
that's a really good question. So so your question is more specifically comparing like Elixir to other languages or Elixir to Amplify?
No, Elixir to say like Node, or if people were
Elixir to Node, right? Side. So the paradigm is different, right? So the way that you think around problems is different because the nature of those languages is different, right? So JavaScript is a so-called functional language, which it's not so much. You can program in JavaScript in Node using functions, but it's not particularly a functional language, right? Elixir is a functional language. There's no such thing as objects, and you have features of the language that allows you to think differently, and it's just a different platform. Elixir runs on the Erlang virtual machine on the Beam, so it leverages all of 30 years of development that's been put into the Beam, and it has concurrency built into the language. It has fault tolerance. It has resiliency, and it's just a different way to solve problems when compared to Node.js and JavaScript. So, and that's why we chose it.
We see, a lot more consistent, people using Node server side and then React, and people's whole company platforms utilizing that and not looking at languages like Alexa. So yeah, it's always good to know if there are specific areas. And the final thing, so people that have kind of sat in that mobile space that have maybe come from a background of Ionic or Cordova, are there still instances where that would still be better for them to do, or are you kind of a massive advocate of everyone kind of plowing down that React Native route for pretty much everything?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I personally have not used Cordova or Ionic or any of the other, hybrid solutions, but I also have, and maybe it's within my bubble, within my circle, I've never heard anybody that was enthusiastic about them. Like all the people that I've heard that had to work with them, like were just doing it because somebody else made that decision, and they just had to get it done. And I've had experience using way back when, like Ruby Motion and other technologies that aimed to make native development easier, and I haven't found one that did it well until I tried React Native. So yeah, that was the reason why I stick to it. It's definitely in a much better place than it was like 4 years ago. The community and the technology have both reached what I'd like to call like a mature stage, and yeah, that was my reason. Like I when talking about Cordova and Ionic, I think they're still like considered like hybrid. You write, I'm not sure how much native code they're actually producing behind the scenes when you compile. So yeah.
Yeah, and finally, for people that are looking to make the move to React Native, and you gave some materials for the Amplify side of things. Is there any way you could point them in that direction of good places to start? Any people, any articles you've seen, etc., just to kind of help them on their way?
Yeah, definitely. Egghead.io has really good content on React Native. Pluralsight has really good content on React Native, and I also want to mention React Native School. I think it's reactnativeschool.com. They, as the name implies, they're, focused on React Native, and Spencer, who is the author for that content, does an amazing job explaining those concepts. So I'd recommend those places to look for and learn React Native.
Cool, perfect. Does anyone else have anything to ask at all? No worries if not. If you do, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask Carlos. Take that as
Has
a
anyone
no
here used Amplify? Just curious, in any capacity in the past, or no?
I've not heard much about it, so I assume is it fairly new in terms of its adoption?
I can't tell you exactly how long Amplify has been around. Definitely, more than like a year or so. But like I said, like the addition of the admin UI on last December was a game changer for me, and that's what like made me really look into actually using Amplify.
Okay, cool. So, yeah. Thank you. Well, if that's it, if anyone else thinks of anything, or anyone that's watching this back has any questions, feel free to drop myself a message or get in touch with Carlos on LinkedIn. But yeah, really appreciate your time. It's a really interesting topic, and yeah, there's a lot of thank yous flying in the chat, so I'm sure they've got some great value about it. So I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for everybody that made it. And yeah, if you have any questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and I'll be happy to chat.
Thanks, Carlos. And yeah, thanks everyone for turning up. And yeah, we'll hopefully see all of you next month.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Satish. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
See y'all.